So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our webinar, our SolSmart webinar about solar permitting and inspections. I'm delighted you could join us. I'm Kathy Kuntz. I am the director of the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, and we're co-hosting this webinar with CARPC, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. This webinar is part of the effort that our office and CARPC are partnering on to help local governments in Dane County achieve SolSmart designation, which in turn supports customer-based solar installations across our territories. And those solar installations contribute to our climate goals, both CARPC's regional framework goals and our climate action plan goals. So to date, we have 4 communities, McFarland, Middleton, Mount Horeb, and Sun Prairie, who are pursuing designation. We're always excited to have more folks join that list, so let me know. This is going to be just a really terrific webinar today. So we're going to start out with Zach Wyman from SolSmart talking a little bit about SolSmart, and then we've got 2 amazing experts from the National Renewable Energy Lab, Surtak Akar and Jeff Cook, to do the presentations on permitting and inspections. And we are recording this session. We'll share that out. We'll share out PowerPoints afterwards. You can put questions in the chat or the Q&A as we're going along, and we'll monitor those and sort of address them in a timely way throughout the presentations. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Zach.
Thanks, Kathy. Can you guys hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start off with a quick introduction of what the SolSmart program is all about before we get into the permitting inspection training. I am Zach Wyman. I work for the Cadmus Group, and we are a consultant that is one of the technical assistance providers through the SolSmart program. And just want to make sure that navigated. You guys can see the third slide?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so the SolSmart program is a national designation and technical assistance program that has helped over 500 local governments. I think we're at 510 now, make it faster, easier, and more affordable for residents and businesses to go solar. And the designation, what that means, it's a recognition of communities that have taken key steps to address local solar barriers to solar energy and foster growth of a mature local solar market. All technical assistance, I'll say it up front, is available at no cost. And it is helpful to, when you're thinking about the SolSmart program, there's the hard costs, so like the panels, the inverters, the electrical work that goes into a solar installation, but there's also the soft costs, which are permitting, inspection, zoning. And the SolSmart program, it's not providing grants or funding to get solar projects built. It's more so focused on the soft costs. So streamlining processes and aligning them with best practices. So the developers are not in a situation where they're going community and having to figure out specific requirements, because those costs eventually get passed on to the consumer. And also, if you have to do 3 inspections, it costs the community a lot more time and money that's often limited to do that work too. So it's intended to reduce the cost of the system installation for the consumer, but also save the community time and money as well. And the technical assistance, I'll just touch on here, but we'll cover it in more detail later. It's typically phone calls, trainings like this one, and then also the SolSmart program has a host of guides, templates, examples from folks across the country and communities in Wisconsin as well that have gone through the program that we can share with anyone interested in SolSmart. It is a big plus for Wisconsin that you have all these designees that have kind of blazed the path. It is, while we have national templates and resources that we can provide, it is always best to have someone in your state that has tailored those resources to the Wisconsin context. A quick example is the Dane County team has put together a great solar landing page, and I have never had a community not willing to share some work that they've already done. People are usually proud of the resources that they put together, and it makes it easier and easier for other interested communities in the state to get designated when you have folks at all the other designation levels that have already achieved those goals. So I'm sure most here are familiar. I know Dane County and CARPC have done a lot of solar already, but just a quick overview of the benefits of solar. And also, if you do want to repurpose these slides as a sales pitch to get your community involved down the line, solar helps support climate and sustainability goals, which a lot of communities across the country are integrating into their plans recently. Generates local, clean, and reliable power, creates local jobs and supports economic development, and reduces utility bills and provides price stability for those that actually install the solar as well. So when thinking about SolSmart, there's really three buckets of actions. We call them criteria in the program. So there's criteria and requirements that increase transparency. So that could be something like posting a permitting checklist online. So anyone who wants to install solar and knows exactly the permitting requirements that they must meet to install solar in the community, or developing something like a solar landing page where if a resident is interested in solar, they search solar in my community, they get directed to the solar landing page, and it has everything from the solar permitting checklist to the inspection requirements, and details on federal and state incentives, utility programs. It really just making sure everyone who wants those resources can find them in one spot, because residents are oftentimes kind of jumping into something new. So it's helpful for them to have one spot to look in for this type of information. The next bucket, which is part of the reason we're here today, is increasing understanding. So it's providing trainings like this on solar PV. So permitting inspection staff are familiar with the processes and the resources available. And then training planning and zoning staffs on best practices. So the next time a zoning code rewrite does come up, this type of thing is on their radar and they know how to integrate solar and maybe remove some of the unintentional barriers to installing solar PV in the community. And that gets me to the third bucket, reducing barriers. It's often sometimes not having guidance. It's like a silence is a barrier, because someone new to solar looks at the zoning code, it's not mentioned. I don't know how to figure this out, because it's not explicitly written out how I can get solar. Or there's the real explicit barriers like let me think, aesthetic standard on a roof where you can't have solar on your roof in the community for whatever reason. Those are the types of barriers that we're trying to remove. And then there's also things like permitting turnaround timelines, and allowing solar by right, because you really don't need to be treating a 7 kilowatt residential system the same as a 2 megawatt utility scale system in the community. So we want to make sure that those two things are delineated and things are treated appropriately. Just quick on the designation structure itself. The SolSmart program is separated into 4 designation levels. So there's bronze, silver, gold, and now starting in 2023, there's a platinum. And each tier has a set of requirements and then a host of other options or criteria that kind of allow communities to choose their own adventure. So, for example, every silver community or county or regional organization has completed all the bronze and all the silver requirements. So they're similar in that way. But each community has the option to choose from I think it's almost 100 criteria now, exactly which pathway and which criteria that will be most beneficial to them. as part of their effort to achieve the requirements for that designation level. So just real quick, bronze designees are really focused on increasing transparency. So we ask them to complete the permitting checklist and a zoning review. It's really just making sure if there are issues there, people are aware of them, and then identify ways to fix that in the future. Silver designees, that level, the requirements focus on training. So now that you've identified the process as it is now and any potential issues, training those responsible for implementing those rules about the current processes and ways to potentially improve upon them with national best practices. Gold designees, then you're really getting into making the changes that have been identified in the previous two levels. So confirming that the community has 3-day solar permitting turnaround and codified in the zoning ordinance that there are no barriers to solar PV, and also that accessory use PV is allowed by right. And then new with platinum, those are the people that are going above and beyond on all things related to solar. So the platinum requirements include things like adopting instant solar permitting, publishing metrics on local solar growth, so you can kind of see what's going on in your community and the trajectory your community is on, and also kind of can help target potential issues. And then partnering with community organizations to achieve equity goals as well. One other requirement is really leading by example and the community having a solar installation of their own on a municipal building or property. So just real quick here at the end, I'll be available for questions at any point. But some of the resources available include our program guide. So there's 3 different program guides. Most use the standard program guide, which is available to all communities that control their zoning, permitting, inspections. That's what the large majority of communities use. And then there's also a modified program guide for counties, like Dane County is using that program guide, and then a regional organization one as well, which CARPC is using. They're all aligned. The spirit of the criteria and the requirements are all the same. But for example, if a county doesn't have control over zoning, we need a slightly different set of requirements to allow them to navigate through the program. And there's a link there, and we'll probably follow up with those links as well. And then if you are interested in pursuing SolSmart designation, you get matched with a one-on-one technical assistance provider. So I'm the technical assistance provider for Dane County and CARPC, along with a lot of other communities. And we are kind of your gateway to the program. We can answer any questions, hop on one-on-one calls, help you map out your path to bronze, silver, gold, or platinum designation, however you want to do it. Review any resources and make sure you have all the materials that you need to get through the program. And those things include templates like I believe Dane County used our solar landing page template. It lists out what your model web page could look like. It includes all the state and local placeholders for here's where you should link to state regulations, here's where you should link to your local permitting checklist, your zoning code, so folks have access to everything. So we have templates for a lot of the common criteria. And then we can also get you example, like a gold SolSmart zoning code, or link you to other resources as well. So that's the type of technical assistance we can provide. I will say when you're working with your technical assistance provider, you can ask for anything. We might not be able to provide. We are limited in what we can do, but there's nothing you'll ever ask for that you'll then receive an invoice in the mail from us. We're here to answer any questions, and we might have to stop at some point with like developing a certain resource or something, but it is really a partnership with us in the community, and we try to help as much as we can. So if you are interested, you can either shoot me an email. I'm sure we'll follow up with my contact info, or go to the SolSmart website and click join SolSmart, and then me and a couple other people will get that, and you'll be matched with a technical assistance provider. And then today, I think I'm tossing it to the NREL team. We're focusing on permitting inspection in particular, which is aligned with the silver requirements I mentioned earlier. Most local governments have direct oversight of the permitting inspection policies and procedures within their jurisdiction, so that's why it is a requirement. Communities that implement permitting best practices provide solar developers and installers with transparent, efficient, and cost-effective approval processes, which goes to that soft cost. If it's easier for the developer, they know there's a certain standard for SolSmart communities. They can go in, move things through the process quickly, and it in turn saves money for the community and the person getting the solar as well. And well-trained staff and simplified permit applications, again, reduce staff time and the need to have too many permits for what the job actually is, and clear inspection procedures ensure compliance with applicable state and local codes as well. Sometimes simpler the better, especially with the most common residential solar systems that are really small, easy, and people know how to do them at this point. So that is it from me. I will end
Terrific.
this.
Thank you. We'll turn things over to Surtak.
Oh, so thank you, Katie. So my name is Sartaj Akar, and I'm an energy analyst from National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So let's share. I think I need to share my screen at the moment. All right. Perfect.
Yep, we can see it.
It's good. So today, Jeff Cook and I will be presenting the permitting and also the field inspection training sessions. So this training program was developed by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory for the ICMA SolSmart program. This training is designed to provide code officials with information about key oversight responsibilities related to permitting residential solar PV systems. And in this training, we will cover topics related to how to improve your solar permitting process, codes and standards, plan review, structural, electrical, and fire and safety guidelines, and automated permitting with Solar App Plus software. And to start with, I'd like to just give a brief information about what is NREL and what's NREL's role in SolSmart program. So NREL is the national laboratory of the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Program. NREL is committing to support goals of SolSmart to foster proliferation of permitting and inspection best practices that can improve safety while growing strong local solar markets by reducing soft costs. And today we will cover certain topics focusing on the permitting of residential distributed rooftop PV systems. And most PV systems that you interact with are residential, and some systems have energy storage system. We will discuss the energy storage system briefly in this training, but these systems are quite complex, so you may need more training. Similar processes are required when conducting permitting for other applications. So this information can be useful to those others who use cases as well. Finally, the commercial and utility scale PV systems are going to be outside of the scope of this training. So start with, I will just start with a brief overview of the solar energy, not going into the details, but the main types of solar energy systems are the photovoltaic PV, concentrated solar power, CSP, and solar thermal technologies. And the markets are, technically the market is dominated by the PV so far. Many PV systems are now being paired with energy storage systems. Homeowners and businesses are increasing demand of solar PV systems that are paired with this energy storage systems. While this pairing is relatively new, growth over the next 5 years is expected to be significant. So by 2027, nearly 30% of all new behind the meter solar systems will be paired with storage, the energy storage, which is compared to 10% in 2020. And this is also highlighting the importance of the energy storage systems in the solar PV applications. So having said that, let's cover how the local governments interact with these systems. So local governments typically have oversight over planning, land use, zoning, building safety in their communities. And the local governments interact with solar energy systems during the construction, operation, and maintenance stages at residential, commercial, and utility scale. So that's the main interaction of the local governments in systems. And so in order to proceed our training, we planned a group exercise at this moment to get more insight from you and maybe understand the diversity of the audience. So we will have a couple of questions, and Jeff will help me with this session, this part of the training. Jeff, how do you want to continue?
Yeah, I'll jump right in.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, if you click through, I think, Surtash, I'd like to show all of the questions that are gonna come up here. And so if everyone, we're gonna put out a poll question, and we're gonna ask you to answer these 3 questions, just to get a sense of who you are, how many projects you permit, and how much storage might be a part of the solar projects you approved last year. So Kathy, could you open our first poll? Perfect. So yeah, I'm seeing you should be prompted to answer the question. The first one being, what's your role in your community, or what do you serve? And so I'm going to give folks a minute to respond to that until we get critical mass here. All right, I appreciate folks are kind of clicking and moving through the questions. I would encourage you to go through all of the poll questions while we get those in. So the next one, of course, being, how many solar projects did you permit last year? So we're just trying to get a sense of how much volume you're dealing with in the state of Wisconsin. And then, of course, how many of those solar projects are being paired with battery storage? Battery energy storage systems, you might hear them referred to as, or lithium-ion batteries, all sorts of different versions of that. Probably fewer lead-acid batteries in this area, though it's potentially possible. All right, and so it looks like at least we've got a good distribution of folks. We've got inspection folks, plan review staff, permitting folks, sustainability folks. Some of you that are combination, which happens a lot. A lot of people in municipalities have multiple hats, that's for sure. And I see a lot of folks that permit like somewhere between 25 and 50 solar applications every year. But there was one community with more than 50 there in the Phoenix, Arizona, I think is one of the largest communities in the country, and they process over 7,000 PV applications a year. So it gives you a sense of what the scope of PV can be depending on where you are. And it looks like not a lot of storage in Wisconsin so far, pretty small coverage, but in some places it can be up to a quarter. In California, it's over 50%. In places like Hawaii, it's almost 100% where battery storage is paired with solar. So I think we can end the poll so other folks can see the results as well. And so you should be able to see those results from the poll as well, what I was more or less just describing. So a good set of folks here with varying perspectives. And we're going to be talking most about solar and permitting and inspecting solar, which is what most of you are dealing with. We'll speak a little bit to battery storage today. We do encourage you to put your questions in the chat as we go throughout the discussion today. And so we encourage you to do that so you don't forget what your questions are. We will have a chance to respond to your questions at the close of the permitting portion of this, and then as we turn to inspection as well. So with that, I think, Sertaç, I will pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So to continue, so we just discussed who's doing what and what percentages of projects you permit are battery storage. So today we're going to mostly focus on how to improve your solar permitting process. And so if you look at the flow chart of the permitting process, after you sign the contract, there's like a submission stage and an approval stage until the installation, which is followed by the inspection stage until the permission to operate stage comes at the end of the process. So local governments must submit during the submission process, the local government must protect the public health and safety. Permitting ensures that local installations and the building development are safe and in line with the plan for the community. So a typical solar adoption process, including submission, approval, installation, and inspection, and also up to the permission to operate stages. So there are roles for the installers that authorities have in jurisdiction, and also the utilities. And this flow diagram basically shows that discrimination between the roles of different authorities. As you can see, the installers' roles are labeled by the blue, dark blue circles, and the authorities having jurisdiction are in light blue or greenish light blue circle. And there are also utility roles in approval stage, and also the permission to operate stage at the end of the process. And if you want to get more information about this process details, at the end of this slide deck, there will be a reference section, and there's the link for the published paper for this flowchart. You can get more information from that paper. So to continue, actually, how is that project approval process takes place? So a permit application must be submitted for review by the local permitting agency, known as the enforcing agency. In reviewing a permit, the enforcing agency applies state and local construction code requirements, as well as additional local requirements that apply to solar energy installations, such as structural requirements, electrical requirements, and applicable fire safety provisions. And once the permit application is approved, the applicant has permission to build the solar installation. So how is permitting done today? So today, permitting can be done in different ways. It can be done by mail. It can be done in person. It can be done online, or multiple submission formats. Some authorities having jurisdiction accepts only online permitting, which is corresponding to a 7% as a result of this article's application number of applicants. And some authorities of jurisdiction accept only in-person permit application, which corresponds to 27 based on this article. And some authorities having jurisdiction accept only mailed, which is only 2%. The multiple formats are the majority, which is corresponding to 64% of the total applications. And the number of applications in this reference article is 1,605. So to continue, let's take a look at the typical challenges associated with the permitting process. So the first thing is, it is usually unclear. The unclear submission processes and long turnaround times could be the challenge, because the installers must often schedule installation days or weeks in advance, An uncertainty about the permit approval timelines may cause them to wait until the approval to start the scheduling and further lengthening the project timelines. And for that reason, mail permitting and structural reviews are associated with longer project timelines can happen. And another thing that is a challenge is inconsistent requirements and inconsistent interpretations of the code, which is basically a plan review stuff that may require design challenges, and then inspectors may require adjustments to those requested changes. Another challenge is the uncertainty and the delays in permit review timelines that can lead to a slower installation timeline or higher cost to homeowners. For instance, if an installer knew that the permit review would take no longer than 3 days, and the installer could confidently plan an installation date 4 days after the permit submission. So these kind of delays can also increase the cost of the permitting process for homeowners. So one other thing that is important in permitting is a streamlined permitting. And some communities have developed fast lines for certain small PV systems, typically residential, via various improvements, such as adopting solar-specific permits. This is rather than the general building or electrical permits, requiring only a single permit application rather than separate applications for building, electrical, fire, and others. Removing professional engineering reviews for standard residential rooftop systems that meet the criteria. Reducing the number of departments that review a standard residential rooftop permit, such as fewer people at the jurisdiction need to review permit before its approval. Streamlining or removing separate fire-specific reviews of standards and residential permits. Adopting an online permitting platform, allowing online submissions and permit issuance. Coordinating permit review improvements between departments and other local jurisdictions. Adopting an online instant permitting platform that automatically approves permit that meets the predefined criteria, such as the rooftop residential systems using pre-approved equipment. So these are the things that the streamlined permitting can provide. And at this moment, we will have a second group exercise to get more insight from you. As I did, I'm going to open up all the questions at once. We will have a couple of more questions to get your insight here. And
awesome. Thanks so much. So, Kathy, I think you can open the poll. Perfect. And you can see those questions we're asking. So I'm just going to walk through them a little bit today. So we did talk prior about the different ways by which permitting is done today across the country. And so we'd just like folks to respond if you know how it works within your community. So that's the first one. And then we also identified during the pandemic, it certainly was a trying time for everyone, and especially for permitting and inspections departments, when a lot had to close down for a minimum of 2 weeks and then figure out what to do after that. So certainly interested to know if you changed your processes. A lot of folks went from in-person to online, and they kept staying online. So curious if some did virtual inspections during the pandemic, and then they kept that option to do virtual inspections. Some folks went back to what they were doing prior to the pandemic. And so I would love to hear your responses on those questions. And then finally, I know Sun Prairie has been mentioned a couple of times. They went to automated permitting using Solar App as one way to remove the human component of plan review for some parts of their permitting process for solar. And so others have done it a different way. So I think actually I'm going to hold there for a minute and let a few more responses come through before we close them. But ultimately, as I'm looking at the results, I can talk a little bit about those. Most folks are online today and or provide multiple options. So it's pretty frequent for jurisdictions to allow people to process their permits online or come to the counter. As many of you know, some prefer coming to the counter instead of submitting online. And so that's pretty common. A lot of folks, it's about 50-50 if you change your processes during the pandemic. Some folks didn't because they already had an online option. So it didn't really bother them that there was no in-person option for a period of time. And it does sound like some folks have changed their processes back. If you change your process back, would you mind putting in the chat what it is you changed during the pandemic and how you went back to your regular process, what that looked like? But I think we can end the poll now and put the results up for everyone. And it looks like about 50-50 have considered automated permitting in some fashion. And so that's interesting to know too. If people that had considered automated permitting, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat what that consideration looked like, but what did you do? What was your ultimate decision on that? Or if it's still active and you're still thinking about it, would love for you to put that information into the chat. All right, Sartaj, I think at this point we can pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Actually, there was one more question which wasn't in the poll, and we will discuss this later. And maybe this can be a question that we discuss by the end of the training. And this is related to if you consider switching to automated permitting, what will be the benefits that you see, or if you don't prefer, what's your drawback not to proceed with an automated permitting? I will keep this question for last. This is not in the poll, but we will discuss this later. In the meantime, you will have time to think about it. So next step is the codes and standards. In this section, we will just discuss more about the codes and standards. The key permitting code, the key permitting codes and standards are basically where the authorities having jurisdiction enforce these codes, and this may vary from place to place. And the majority of them, which is the majority of the codes are National Electrical Code, International Residential Code, International Building Code, International Fire Code, the National Fire Protection Association standards, local zoning and planning, and some from the American Society of Civil Engineers standards and codes. These are the most common codes and standards. And technically, if you look at the specific articles that covers codes related to solar rooftop permitting, we can see the National Electric Code, Article 690 and 705, chapters 1 to 4 covers most of the codes. This article applies to solar PV systems, including the array circuits, inverters, and controllers for such systems. And the IRC code is a standalone residential code that creates minimum regulations for residential homes. And the IBC, International Building Code, the provision of this chapter in the building code shall govern the design, materials, and construction and quality of the roof assemblies and roof structures. And the IFC code usually applies to the code 605.11 is the code that applies to solar PV systems. And for the American Society of Civil Engineers code, requirements are usually for general structural design that includes means for determining snow, rain, and atmospheric ice, earthquake, wind loads, those kind of structural regulations. And the NEPA code 855 this code may be modified to reflect the local climate, geographical characteristics, and gaps in the model codes. So having said that, these codes apply in most states, and the IBC, starting from the IBC, IBC is in use and adopted in 50 states and the District of Columbia, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and Northern Mariana Islands. But Wisconsin is the only state where the IBC is not adopted. Talking about IFC, it's adopted in 42 states, which excludes Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maryland, and Delaware, and West Virginia, Florida, and also Hawaii. And NEPA 70, the electrical code and the electrical code are adopted in states where standards for electrical best practices are in place. The adopted electrical code can vary by state or local jurisdiction, and often includes a local authority having jurisdiction that inspects the electrical installation for compliance with the adopted standard. And in this last figure, the National Electrical Code, you can see when the code has been adopted based on this color coding. And there are some states which has local adoptions, and it's mostly adopted all across the United States, except I think not all the states are accepting this in different ways. So having said that, we have another exercise about the codes, and we will have a couple of more questions to you.
Yeah, so I can chime in here while we get that poll started. Thanks, Kathy. And so not everyone always knows what codes are enforced in your community, but that is certainly a key question that contractors will have. In addition, the model codes are evolving and are updated every 3 years, and especially for battery storage, as you see more and more batteries get installed with the solar that you're seeing. The code is rapidly evolving for storage, certainly more so than solar. So as we go from the 2017 NEC to the 2020-23, there's actually a lot of changes for storage in those. So if you're on older code, you may be missing out on some of the improvements to the code and the requirements of the code as you go forward. So the question we also have is sort of whether you can make changes or adopt your own model codes. And in the case of Wisconsin, we do know that it's regulated by the state. So you're really kind of limited into what you can do in the state. And so most of you are keying in on that in terms of question number 2. But then that influences to your ability to enforce what you can in the state. And so in some places, you can also make local amendments to the code. But oftentimes, I think that's also potentially limited in your ability in Wisconsin. You might have to go through a process, I think, to get to move that forward and then get it approved by the state. So I'm interested to see what folks say on that, and then reflecting on what model codes you're using. And I think it's NEC 2017 in the state of Wisconsin, if memory serves correctly, in 2015 I codes. So you're kind of right on the border there of some of the older code enforced, and as compared to some other places in the country that are moving ahead to the 2023 NEC, 2021 I codes, or even the 24 I codes as those come out or get published later this year. And so a lot of good feedback in there from everyone. And so I think we can go ahead and show the poll results here for folks, but it kind of relates to what we had already covered relative to in the state of Wisconsin being really driving what the codes enforced are, and then you just implement what you have. But really good to see a lot of folks do know the codes enforced. So I think, Sertac, I can pass it back to you. Sertac, you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. And there's also one comment on the question 4. The codes prior to 2015 actually do not cover regulations or guidelines for energy storage systems. That was actually, if probably you know that already, but if you're using a code prior to 2015 for future systems with energy storage systems, they're not going to be the best reference because the battery storage systems are not covered in those codes prior to 2015. So having said that, next thing is the plan review. In this section, we will just talk about the plan review process for both structural, electrical, and fire and safety guidelines. And the first thing is to understand what is in a plan review. So the plan review with permitting includes structural, electrical, fire, and safety guidelines, and structural guidelines includes general site and array requirements, as well as wind and snow requirements. Electrical guidelines include general electrical requirements and connection requirements of the inverter, both on the load and the supply side. And it depends on your system. If you have a string inverter or a micro inverter, the guidelines could be slightly different, but generally they're all covered in these reference codes. And the most important thing is actually how long does it take, just to know how long your plan review should take. It usually takes between 15 to 60 minutes, depending on the expertise level and the quality of the plan. And high permit volume can lead to large waits. The plan review process is open for mistakes, and to avoid those mistakes, it is recommended to have a plan review checklist. And the plan review checklist, there are available plan review checklists. The plan review checklist can be from SolSmart or other entities that already created the checklist to help the authorities having jurisdiction to complete this critical task. And in this training, we will be using the SolSmart and the International Renewable Energy Council IREX checklists as reference. So next step is how to gather the required information for the permit. So communities collect different information to complete the plan review. Some communities require 3-line electrical diagrams, electrical schematics, site plans, equipment installation instructions, cut sheets, etc. And some communities just require a third-party review plan, such as the Solar App Plus approved plans. So it depends on the community. And after you collect the required information, that will be step by step following the checklist that you have, and finish the plan review as quick and accurate as possible. And the first thing to check in a plan review is the structural requirements. So in this section, we will cover the structural requirements guidelines and the related codes associated with the plan review at each stage. And under structural review process, the member attached and the shedding attached provisions and array requirements, such as the array gaps, mounting orientation, upslope, downslope, anchor spacing, anchor fasteners, wind loads, and low and high wind loads, snow requirements must be reviewed in a structural plan review. And for that, this is the chart that you see on the right-hand side is from SolSmart's checklist, which is very helpful, and you can just guide yourself through the checklist items, and if there are fill-in-blank sections, you can technically take notes for those sections. They will make the review easier. And of course, there are codes that you can relate to your structural review process. And in this one, there are a couple of checklist items, and their related codes are seen in this table here. Rooftop systems must be designed in accordance with the IRC and IBC's code requirements. Roof access points, paths, and clearances are needed to comply with the IFC. And related codes can be found in this summary table, as you can see in this column on the right-hand side. So all roofs must have an access point that does not require placing ground letters or over openings such as windows or doors. These access points must be located at strong points of building construction and must be in locations where the access does not conflict with overhead obstructions such as tree limbs, wires, or signs. Roof must be capable of supporting the weight of the system. So these are the main items to check in a structural review. And if we continue the details of structural review, we can just see that roofs with slopes greater than 2:12 ratio must have solar panel layouts that meets some other additional criteria. For the hip roofs, panel modules are located so that there's a 3-foot wide clear access pathway from the eave to the ridge on each slope where panels and modules are located. For the hips and valleys, if panels or modules are placed on both sides of a lip or valley, they are located no closer than 18 inches to a lip or valley. If panels are located on the only one side of the lip or valley that is of equal length, then the panels can be placed directly adjacent to the lip or valley. For single ridges, panels or modules located so that there's a 3-foot wide access pathway from the eave to the ridge on each roof side where the panels and modules are installed. And for the access for the ridges, the panels or modules must be located no higher than 3 feet apart, 3 feet from the top of the ridge, in order to allow the fire department smoke ventilation operations. And for the access pathways must be located at a structurally sound location capable of supporting the load of firefighters accessing the roof. And these are actually in line with also fire and safety requirements, but it's also part of a structural plan review. So second thing is the electrical review. In this section, we will cover the requirements related to each code. And the key electrical requirement guidelines include general electrical requirements, including the string inverter or a DC converter, a microinverter or AC module, installed PV array, wirings, total inverter capacity, equipment, maximum DC voltage. So this is also an example of the SolSmart's checklist. It's a very detailed checklist that you can find and basically fill your input in the checklist. So this is also a good guide for electrical code installation requirements. And so there are some related codes for the electrical plan review. So first, all PV modules must be listed under the UL 1703 Underwriter Laboratories code requirements, and inverters must be listed to the UL 1741. That's the first thing to check. And then residential 1 or 2 family dwellings are limited to maximum PV voltage of 600 volts DC, and a complete grounding electrode system is present. Must be present. The PV system equipment grounding conductors shall be connected to the grounding electrode system. And this is another important thing. The calculated maximum source circuit current should be or must be the sum of the parallel connected PV module rated short circuit currents multiplied by its 125% value. And the calculated maximum output circuit current must be the sum of all combined source circuits. DC source circuit conductors are rated at either 125% of the ampacity calculated over the ampacity calculated above with conditions of use applied, actually whichever is greater. And finally, the inverter output circuit overcurrent protection device, the point of connection to AC system breaker, is sized based off the maximum inverter output multiplied by its 125% value. And some more electrical requirements is overcurrent protection is required for PV source circuits, PV output circuits, inverter output circuits, and battery circuit conductors and equipment. So the overcurrent protective devices are not required for circuits with sufficient ampacity for highest available current. So where there are three or more strings combined, a listed combiner box in UL 1741 must be used, and the fuses and fuses are required. When the DC source circuits are connected in parallel without fusing, the current through a failed circuit can be the sum of the current connected to the other strings. Therefore, special consideration must be taken to ensure that the sum of the total number of strings minus 1 does not exceed the module manufacturer's series fuse rating and conductor ampacity. And overcurrent devices, where required, are rated at the 25% of the ampacity calculated above and or are rated as assembly of continuous duty. And these are the National Electrical Code 690.9 is actually, and also 110.3b covers these codes. There are a couple of more codes for the electrical plan, such as for the PV source and output circuit, a single overcurrent protection device may be used for each circuit in either the negative or positive conductor. The device must be in the same polarity for all circuits. And the PV system disconnects must be connected to PV system from all other systems. And the disconnects or isolating devices are installed for all ungrounded conductors. One other thing is for the rapid shutdown. The rapid shutdown initiation device must be labeled on the plans, and the device must be either a service disconnecting means, PV system disconnecting means, or a readily accessible switch that plainly indicates where it is in the off or on position. So when we come to the stage where the project has a storage, so what are we going to do when we have a project which has a storage? There are additional requirements and guidelines to follow. If the project has an electrical storage system, the plan review would be subject to additional code installation and interconnection requirements. The supply side load connections must comply with the National Electrical Code 705.11 and 12A and 12B. Power control systems must comply with National Electrical Code 705.13. And batteries other than the lead acid batteries must be listed. A disconnect means is provided for all grounded conductors derived from a stationary battery system over 50 volts AC or 60 volts DC. Wiring connections of PV inverters, PV source circuits, battery connections, and all interconnections are performed by qualified personnel. And high interrupt listed DC rated fuses or circuit breakers must be used in battery circuits, and the amps interrupting capacity AIC must be at least 2000 amps. So that brings us to the fire requirements. For key fire requirements, the key fire requirements actually include fire setbacks, escape pathways, battery spacing, smoke alarms, heat detectors, labeling, and disconnects. And the setbacks are considered different from access pathways. If an array has as an example, if an array has a 33% of the roof area or less, 18 inches, 1.5 feet distance from the roof ridge should be available for access. And if the array is more than 33% of the roof area, at 36 inches, like 3 feet distance, should be available from the roof ridge. And there should be a minimum of two 36 inches, 3 feet pathways from the eave and the ridge, eave to the ridge, to have separate roof planes, which will have easy access for firefighters. And other thing that it needs to be considered in fire and safety requirements is the fire classification. There are 3 fire classes, A, B, C. A is the highest severe fire exposure class, B is the moderate, and C is the light. And this is one of the things that should be first checked, both on the plan review and also on the inspection when the time comes to inspection, field inspection side. And this is basically in the label of the modules. You can just see the listing here, the UL 2703 listing, or the fire type listing, fire type class type C or class A. So if the existing roof requires a fire classification, the module fire type should be checked in the plan review. And this brings us to another group exercise. We will have a couple of more questions for you.
Awesome. Yeah, if we could have folks come back to the poll. So Kathy, if you wouldn't mind opening it for us. Poll number 4, this will be our last one on the permitting side. And so we are curious if you use the permitting checklist in your own community. That could be one you've generated internally, or one you've pulled from SolSmart, or one you found elsewhere. There's certainly quite a few checklists. So if you have one, we'd love to know if you use it. And if that checklist, are you aware if it has been updated in the past 5 years? Certainly if it's the SolSmart one, it has been so, but the one you used, has it been updated? Or do you know when it was last updated? And then do you know if that checklist includes parameters around battery storage? So those are the 3 questions, and we'll give it a couple minutes more here, just maybe 1 more minute for folks to respond to that. We're seeing a lot of people that do use a checklist, which is really, really good to hear. A lot of you, and not only do you use a checklist, but it's been updated recently, which is also important. But it's good to see that a lot of, about half deal with storage, and that kind of makes sense because you haven't seen a lot of storage in the state. But going forward, you'll probably see more. And so that's probably something that you'll want to look into as you consider updates to which checklist you use. So I think we can end the poll now and show those results. The folks, more or less what I just described. And thank you so much for participating. So I think at this point we can move forward.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Actually, next chapter is the solar app. Jeff will continue. I'm just leaving the stage to you, Jeff, at this moment.
Awesome. All right, so you've heard us reference solar app a couple of times, and we've also been mentioning a bit in the chat about what it is. So solar app is an automated permit processing plus platform that can process certain residential solar and storage projects. And do over 300 code compliance checks on the solar and the battery to ensure whatever the system approves is code compliant. Now, and of course, the contractor is then of course responsible for installing it per the solar app program, and then that must be enforced at time of inspection. And so solar app was designed to help jurisdictions like yourself process solar permits, particularly as those solar permit numbers and volume go up over time. In addition, if you don't have a ton of solar permits, or you already process these permits pretty quickly, it can just provide a faster, more efficient process so your staff can focus on more complex projects that couldn't otherwise be approved by the platform itself. And so it does that plan review. A couple of snapshot items we're seeing across the country. that Solar App projects that are approved through Solar App are installed about 13 business days faster. And that's because it avoids any permitting queue, and the contractor knows when they get a Solar App approval document, they can go right to inspection, or installation, I should say, right to installation, and then they can schedule their inspection. It can save staff time between 15 minutes and 60 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to review a project. And that can result, Solar Apps process 30,000 permits today. So that's 30,000 hours of time saved using the application. In addition, it's of course critical that every project is verified at time of inspection, that whatever the contractor said they were going to do at plan review, the same thing, whatever they said on their plan that was approved by your staff must be verified at time of inspection. Solar App projects are passing inspection about 30% more often than those that go through the traditional process. And that's helpful because Solar App is giving a checklist that the contractor can use when they leave the job site. They know what the inspector is going to be looking for. They know all the code compliance checks that are going to be happening. So if they just make sure they install per the checklist, they're not going to fail inspection because that is the code compliant job. And so that's what the Solar App is in a nutshell. So let's dig into it a little bit more. And we can go to the next slide, Sir Touch. So how was Solar App developed? Solar App was developed bringing all of the code development agencies like the International Code Council and all the testing agencies like UL, as well as contractors and local governments together to take all of the code compliance checks that are happening. Some of you at the desk are doing these probably without even thinking about them. Take all that information and all that code information and translate it into software so that the contractor can enter information and the software can then evaluate it and determine whether or not it's code compliant. So we did that as a collaborative exercise with all the folks here. We've also had UL and ICC perform audits on everything going through Solar App, and they've also put out press releases confirming that Solar App aligns with the 2017 National Electrical Code, the 2018 I-Codes, the 2020 Electrical Code, the 2021 I-Codes, the 23 Electrical Code, and now very soon the 24 I-Codes. So that's all embedded within Solar App. We can move to the next slide. So this just talks a little bit about what's eligible for Solar App. So Solar App cannot approve every residential rooftop solar system, and it can't approve any commercial system. It can't approve any ground mount system. Solar App can only approve rooftop residential PV systems. That's rooftop residential PV systems, only up to 38.4 kW, and only in the event that they're adding battery storage or not adding battery storage. They cannot add PV to an existing PV system through Solar App and then tack on a battery. They can't add PV to an existing system that already has a battery on site. Solar App is really designed for new retrofit PV systems, so not new construction, retrofit PV systems. And you're probably getting a lot of those. That's a lot of your, that is a lot of your volume right now. Is people that already have a home, they already live in the home, there is no PV on site, there's no power generation equipment on site, and they want to add a PV system. That's what Solar App is designed for. Now, Brian mentioned in the chat, and we've already mentioned quite a bit, that Wisconsin is on the 2015 I-Code. So how can Sun Prairie be using Solar App if Solar App's only permissible to approve 2017 and 18 I-Codes as a family? Well, we got approval from the state of Wisconsin to allow the use of Solar App in the entire state. And what we're basically doing is we got a modification to allow to use the wind and snow speed requirements, frankly, of what's in the 2018 code cycle and apply those in the state of Wisconsin. So now Solar App is an approved measure, and Brian put in the chat what that product approval number is so that we can enforce Solar App in the state. And thanks, Brian, for clarifying. And in this particular case, the residential code. But in any event, Solar App is approved, or Solar App enforces or can enforce the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, as well as the National Electric Code. Excuse me. And so that's what's permissible within Solar App, and that's why Solar App is eligible for use in the state of Wisconsin. Now, just to reiterate, it's rooftop residential PV. That's what can go through Solar App. And now there's quite a bit of snow load in Wisconsin, as many of you know, and we've identified we've known there's a a limitation in solar app that might have a more significant impact on the volume that can go through in your community. So solar app was designed to cover about 80% of typical rooftop projects. That was a nationwide metric. Now, there are a lot more metal roofs in the state of Wisconsin than there are elsewhere. And solar app cannot approve projects where there's a 15 pounds per square foot snow load or higher, and it's also a metal roof system, whereby they're installing PV on top of a metal roof. And so we're looking into that and trying to think about pathways to resolve for that, but that's one area that would not be permissible in solar app today as well, which would have ramifications in Wisconsin and areas in the rest of the country that have a higher penetration of metal roofs. Metal roofing in the States. All right, so I want to move to the next slide. And again, as folks have additional questions, please put them in the chat so that we can clarify them. So there's a lot of interest in using the system across the country, and you can see that here. We've got a lot of engaged communities and a lot we've worked in. We're actually processing permits now in 11 states. I can say the state of Nevada will be joining us. Las Vegas will be using the system starting in February. So we'll get in our 12th state. But you can see that we're active in a lot of places, including now Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois in the Midwest. So that's really exciting. And we're looking forward to hearing from a lot more other folks here if you want to learn more about how solar app can be used in your community. So we can move forward to the next slide. So how does it work? The contractor enters information into solar app about their design. We ask them how many modules they are installing. We ask them what's the roof size. We ask them what racking equipment they're using. We ask them what inverter they're using. We ask them how many modules are going to be in a string. And we ask them what the breaker size is at the main panel. We ask all sorts of questions in the system. The contractor's design team must answer those questions. This is a far more detailed set of questions than a typical permit process would have. Why is that? Because the software is doing a plan review. Now, no diagrams or typical 3-line diagrams are uploaded into the system as a part of this process. Instead, the contractor takes information from their design, inputs it into solar app. If that system is code compliant, solar app will issue an approval document with an inspection checklist. That inspection checklist that I mentioned prior is what the inspector would use out in the field, starting at the main panel, working their way up to the roof. If they go on the roof, if not, performing visual inspections of what's on the roof. Either way, solar app checklist will tell the inspector what to do at every step of the way. So that's really helpful to a combination inspector if they're not very familiar with solar, or it's just a guide for an inspector that's done 1,000 solar jobs and knows the code the back of their hand. They can just look at a system and know whether or not it's code compliant. And so in that case, the solar app checklist is just a guide to help that inspector perform their inspection. And there are sample documents that we can provide if you're interested in seeing them. Now we can go to the next slide. As many of you know, oftentimes you'll get an incomplete plan or it won't have all the information that you need to determine whether or not it's code compliant, but you still had to review the whole thing, then fill out all your corrections, and then send it back to the contractor. The solar app product will not allow a contractor to submit a project without having a code compliant system, full stop. They can never send an incomplete application through solar app that would otherwise not be able to verify code compliance. So here's an example of what the contractor is entering. They have to tell us the manufacturer, the model numbers, and we do these in internal databases so they can't do fat finger mistakes because you could enter one number incorrect on a model number and it will make no sense. And so solar app prohibits that kind of ability to make those kinds of mistakes. And so that's just showing a little bit what the interface looks like within solar app. And so the contractor has to answer all those questions and then we verify that. And I'll show that in a couple of next screens. So I think we can move to the next one. So if a project is not code compliant, we will tell the contractor it is not code compliant. One of the most frequent failures that we see is where a contractor has submitted a module and they have submitted a rack, which have both been tested to UL 2703 for grounding and bonding, but have not been tested as a system, meaning SurTouch, your Teams is popped up here. Thanks, SurTouch. meaning the module and the rack were not tested together for grounding and bonding. And that needs to be shown in the installation manual that the module and the rack were tested together. That is a common error. And a lot of jurisdictions don't check for it, but it is required per the code that they are tested as a system to 2703. And SolarApp checks that every time, and it will fail the contractor and say, this project is not approvable. You have to go back and change your rack or your module to have a compliant combination. And so we reject them. So no project can go through SolarApp without being code compliant. And these are just some of the error messages that they receive. So again, instead of your staff having to do corrections, send it back to them and get another one back, and now you have to do another plan review on what you just reviewed, SolarApp eliminates that and does it all within the system itself. It will also tell a contractor if their system is not eligible for SolarApp Plus, and that would have to go to your regular staff across the plan review desk. And that could be, for example, if they're using 2 different types of racking equipment. SolarApp can't approve that, but that is potentially code compliant depending on what that configuration is. So that's something SolarApp couldn't approve. And we talked about some of the other things SolarApp couldn't approve previously. So this just shows you what that would look like. Now we can go to the next slide. All right, if you're interested in learning more about SolarApp, there's a couple of pathways or steps to do that. And so Sun Prairie is actually someone that went through all of these steps. And so Brian's been active in the chat. If you have questions about Sun Prairie's perspective, we're happy to address those as well. But ultimately, what we need you to do is register your interest at SolarApp. And I'll put a link in the chat for where you can do that. So you can sign up for an account. It'll tell you all the stuff we'll need for you to understand what SolarApp does and what we would need from you to get you to a pilot. Then we would need to set up an instant workflow process and then launch the product. I believe we talk about the 2 adoption pathways here in a second. So I'm not going to talk about them here. But as far as launching, some folks have just launched SolarApp without a pilot. Sun Prairie did a pilot. And our folks in Illinois and Illinois and Iowa have done pilots as well. But some folks in California and Arizona have opted not to do a pilot at all and just let the thing go. And so that'll be a choice for you. And then every step of the way, NREL will be working with you to help understand your questions, your concerns, and make sure it's working smoothly for you. If we go to the next slide. Oh, perfect. Actually, let's go back one Sir Touch, and I'll talk about the adoption pathway. And so there are 2 pathways to adopt SolarApp. If you already have an online permitting system, which many of you do, SolarApp would just perform the plan review for that, and it would work a lot like what is happening in Sun Prairie. So the contractor would get approval in SolarApp. They would take a couple of PDFs that they get approval for, and they would manually upload those into your own permitting system, and they would get a permit instantly from you. That's how the process would work. SolarApp would only perform the plan review if you have an online permitting system. If you do not have an online permitting system, or your online permitting system doesn't allow for the issuance of instant permits, given SolarApp has already performed the plan review on your behalf, then there's a second option where SolarApp could issue the permit on your behalf. Now, that is a separate pathway, and I don't think many of you, I think most of you mentioned you are online already, so you would be in that online integrated process by which you would issue the permit. Now, it's a manual upload from the contractor into your permitting system. Our system doesn't communicate with your system. Unless you have EnerGov or Tyler Technologies EPL product, it's possible that then our system could send the documents to you, but that's still in active development. Anyway, so I talked quite a bit about sort of the adoption process for SolarApp here. And like I said, we can talk more about that if you have questions. So now, Sir Touch, I can pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think this is the time to summarize what we have gone through today, and I will just continue with some takeaway bullet points. Today in this training, we covered the best practices for the permit application review and the processes to ensure applications, and streamlining the permitting processes and also plan review guidelines, including tips for making review more efficient, and also examples of some checklists from SolSmart and IREC checklist templates. And we provided supporting documents, which will be a reference slide. I'm sure this slide deck will be distributed. You can have access to resources from the reference slide deck as the last slide of the slide deck for supporting documents related to the codes and checklists and others. And other thing that we covered today is just we increase the understanding of the latest codes and standards related to solar installations. And we learn more about the Solar App Plus opportunities to expedite the permit review. So that brings us to a Q&A session. So before we start the Q&A session, I will just share this reference page. You can find all supporting information, publications, checklists, or training opportunities. We strongly recommend the IREC training website, which has detailed trainings for the structural, electrical plan review and permitting processes, and also other references that we use during this training will be available here. So going back, actually, I think I would like to open the Q&A session at the moment for this permitting training before we proceed to the next training session.
Yeah, thanks, Sertaç. And Kathy mentioned in the chat as well that folks can put their questions there, or you can come off mute and chat through your perspective. Brian, I know you're here from Sun Prairie. If you wouldn't mind coming off mute and just chatting a little bit about your experience using the product, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yep.
Oh, okay, good. I got too many mute buttons, so sometimes I don't know if I'm on or off. We're still relatively new to it. You know, we implemented the Solar App Plus system. Jeff, and I apologize if you mentioned it, but there's also a contractor certification piece to that as well. So I'll just list one that's prominent in Dane County. Everlight Solar. They reached out through the Solar App Plus setup. We've got all the information on our website. Went through the basic training. I think Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of it is just kind of how to use the system, what the expectations are, what they need to bring to the table. Some of the feedback we got from them is they kind of had to retool their workflow a little bit because they're kind of used to their designers designing a system, creating the documents, and then having their support staff submit that to the jurisdiction for permitting and plan review. So what they found, I think, with the Solar App Plus was that their designers are getting engaged with that part of the system because they're the ones that actually, know the nuts and bolts of the system and how it's being designed. So they're actually getting into the Solar App Plus platform and inputting all the required data to get that approval. So we've got a couple approvals through them, came through our permit process. We've got 100% online permitting. We created a very basic form for that. So literally they have a few pieces of minor information they have to put in, address, their find their contractor information, load that up. And then our workflow is automated at that point. So it requests the payment, it issues the documents, and then we do a spot check of the licensing and stuff after the fact, just to confirm that. So, and Jeff, I believe Solar App Plus is doing some of that license check work on your end too as well. Am I correct with that statement?
Yep. Yeah, we require them. You brought up, we require the contractor to be trained before they can use Solar App. And so that's the first step you'd mentioned. And we also require them to have a state license that's valid, and then also a valid city business license if you require that too. And so we do check that, but then it's often double checked by the jurisdiction, which we think is important because it is important to make sure that those licenses are valid when they apply for their permit.
Yeah, and in the case of Wisconsin, because we've got 2 licenses, they're checking master electrician. They're not double checking, I don't believe, the contractor license. So we just spot check those on the back end. We've got all that information already preloaded into our system already anyway. So most of the time they're up to date. So we have not gotten to the point yet where any of those three systems, we've been, what, 6-8 weeks into this. So we haven't gotten to the point yet where we've done any field inspections based off of the checklists and stuff that Jeff
I think
I'm back.
I lost-
Sorry,
oh, there's
I bumped the mute button on the cord. Oh, I think I covered everything. I don't know exactly what I cut out, but I said we haven't quite reached the inspection point with the three that we've got in our system. So we haven't been able to use the checklist yet that you've talked about. So.
Yeah, and that's an important part. And it's an important part of the pilot too, to make sure inspectors understand the checklist, how to use it, what's there, and so that there is no slippage in anything. And certainly we don't want the inspector to feel like they have to do plan review out in the field, because that is not the intent. Solar App did that. They just need to be able to understand how to use it, which is critical. So yeah. We've been really, really happy to work with you, Brian, and the Sun Prairie team as our first user in Wisconsin. So hopefully we can get some more to be able to use the tool, understand it, and hopefully help improve their process.
I'd be remiss if I didn't just ask or follow up with, we've got to get the metal roof thing solved. Because that's, I think not only in Wisconsin, but the upper Midwest, a lot of metal roofs. And we don't want to get into a position where, and I'm just being honest, and I'm guessing the audience is going to agree with me, where we're getting too particular on who can use it, who can't. Having those customers go deep into the onboarding process and get into Solar App Plus, only to find out that 25 to 30-40% of their projects aren't going to be eligible anyway because it's got a metal roof on the house. So the sooner you guys can collaborate on that and hopefully come up with a solution, the better. So
yeah, and that is something that we are actively considering here. We have what we call a structural team, so to speak, which we have tasked with thinking through options around what can be done for metal roofs, because it's not an easy answer. It's metal roofing and adding weight on top of a metal roof can be quite difficult, considering they're so lightweight to begin with. So there's a lot of thinking we need to do around metal roof systems, but that's part of the point, because Solar App is here to make sure that whatever we approve 100% of the time is code compliant. So we've got some work to do, but we're here to do it.
So one follow-up to that, Jeff, is our team are more than happy to provide any feedback or anything as you guys progress in that discussion. But the one thing I'll just add with the checklist, and this is what got us interested from the start, is if you're thinking about adopting this product and using it, one, there's no cost to you to do it. Number two, all of the heavy lifting for the plan reviews now taken off your shoulders. You don't have to be afraid of the plans. You don't have to spend hours upon hours reviewing the plans. It comes to you as an approved document. It comes to you with a very, very, very detailed checklist. You literally go line by line. Yep, 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 nope, and so on and so forth. So that's the thing that really got us engaged, that it's really going to not only simplify the front end on the permitting side, but it's going to really simplify the back end out in the field. So
absolutely. And then Kathy, I think not seeing other questions at this point. We were planning to take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, one thing from me before we do that, I want to just kind of do a shout out to you guys and to Sun Prairie, and make sure that everybody else is realizing that Sun Prairie did the heavy lifting with NREL to get this approved for Wisconsin. So now if somebody else wants to do this, it's much simpler than it was for Sun Prairie, because all of those questions about how our kind of old codes comply with this product have been resolved. And so I know I've been having that conversation one-on-one with some communities that it's like, yay, Sun Prairie, they did all the heavy lifting for us on this one. Other folks can just dive in, but just to make sure that everybody realizes that. Many thanks to Brian in this case. But yes, then let's move forward, Jim.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Kathy and Brian. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot to talk about your perspective on solar app. So like I
no
said,
problem.
at this point, we are going to, thank you so much. We are going to take a 5-minute break. So I see the time as 11:33. So we're going to come back at 11:38 to start the inspection process. So yeah, if you need to stretch your legs, get some water, etc., you can do that now. Hey there, Sutesh, would you mind putting the inspection slides up? So we'll be ready to go here in about a minute. Hey, Sir Touch, did you catch that? Are you back?
I'm here.
Awesome. Would you mind putting the slides up?
Sure.
Yeah, so this will conclude our 5-minute break here. And so, Sir Touch, once you get those slides up, we'll be able to go ahead and get started again. And then, yeah, Sir Touch, if you're ready, let's go for it.
Okay. So. All right. So this is the second session of today's training, which is about the field inspections. And in this training session, we will provide code officials with information about key oversights and responsibilities related to the field inspection of the residential rooftop solar PV systems. We will cover topics related to how field inspections occur, how to prepare for field inspection, how to perform the field inspection, and go into more depth for how to inspect different different PV systems and the best practices related to that. So what are we covering today in this training? The focus of this training here is on the field inspection of residential rooftop PV systems. Additional inspection processes are also required for electric energy storage systems that are added to the PV installations. And we will discuss the energy storage systems briefly in this training, but these systems are complex, so they may need more training. And finally, the multi-family or commercial applications, ground-mounted systems, and many energy storage applications are going to be out of the scope of this training. So to start with, what is the field inspection? And why are inspections necessary for solar? So inspection is the last line of defense to enforce public safety and health and safety. Perfect plan does not always equal to perfect install. Many projects fail inspection, and NREL data shows that on average, 24% fail in 12 authorities having jurisdiction in this reference paper. And 58% of the identified failures are related to the work quality issue, meaning that the system was not installed per the code. This figure shows the inspection failure rates in percentages by the authorities having jurisdiction for both traditional and the Solar App Plus inspections. And inspections can be done in different ways. Field inspections can be scheduled in person, online, over the phone, or combination of all. The inspections can be planned within a 2-hour window, and half-day window, a full day window, or uncertain window based on the complexity and difficulty of the system to be inspected. And how inspections are able to schedule in the community can influence the cost of the installation. For example, if a staff person must be there all day and the inspector doesn't end up making it to the site, that is 8 hours plus of loss of productivity, and this will add up the cost. And by reducing scheduling windows, communities can have a potential impact on the inspection cost. So how inspection process evolved over time. This is an important slide to take a look at the COVID pandemic impact on the inspection processes. Most of the field inspections were conducted in person prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And during the pandemic, an alternative inspection option such as virtual, Skype, FaceTime, etc., photo inspections or third-party inspections grew, but in-person inspections remained as the most common. 'The number of virtual and photo inspections reduced after the pandemic, and 50% of the inspections were conducted in person. 'The number of virtual and photo inspections grew, but in-person inspections remained as the most common. 'The number of virtual and photo inspections reduced after the pandemic, and 50% of the but it's remained as the alternative option in many communities, suggesting that these options have been successfully implemented, and the communities in those communities, and they may grow in the post-pandemic future. The type of inspection can also have impact on the cost of the system, especially in an event that you require conductors to be on site. So, having said that, what are we going to do while preparing for a field inspection? So, who and what is needed to carry out an inspection? Actually, it depends and varies by the authorities having jurisdiction. Some require a representative from the installer, and some require that the representative to be an electrician. Here is another pathway which inspection processes can influence the soft cost by requiring an electrician at the time of inspection, when you only offer a long day window that can be quite expensive. So what is needed to perform an inspection also varies by the authorities having jurisdiction. Plans might include single or 3-line diagrams, site layouts, spec sheets, installation manuals, loads, structural, electrical calculations, or photos, and some requires just access and a letter, and some doesn't require the letter and just don't go up to the roof. And inspection processes are modified if the community adopts a Solar App Plus Platinum designation. And the Solar App Plus inspection checklist covers everything that must be inspected and how the inspector should verify it. This also helps the inspectors without expert knowledge in solar to understand what needs to be inspected and how. And Solar App Plus has also been correlated with better inspection rates, which could be contractors can check their install before inspection to ensure it is code compliant per the checklist. So coming to the performing of field inspection, before starting the inspection, the inspector should ensure the system is not energized. The best place to start the inspection is the solar array, and electrical path can be followed to the grid point. During that, the inspector should look for most common and most serious code violations. If the time is limited, the inspector can focus on the inverter, array, grid connection, and junction boxes, which have the most common code violations are actually located. So if you look at the chart here, we can just see this is from a previous training. You can see the major code violations in different parts of this PV system, and inverter is ranking first in code violation location, followed by array, and then the grid connection point and junction box, and it continues with the AC combiner and disconnects and other components. As we explained earlier, if time is limited, it's recommended to look at the major code violation areas that will give a insight about the system's major code violations. So, inspector guides and checklists. Given time and resource constraints, inspection checklists can be a key resource for inspectors to carry out their code enforcement obligations, especially when the inspector is not very familiar with solar. Many entities have checklists to inform the solar inspections. Solar App Plus, SolSmart, ERE, CERC, and IRAC have their well-organized inspection checklists. And you can find the links for those checklists in these links. And what are the key elements of these checklists? Despite the varying checklists, they have most of the same key elements relating to wiring management, which includes conductors, conduits, raceway, cable assembly, connectors, PV modules, racking, inverter, and point of utility connection, grounding, overcurrent protection, disconnects, rapid shutdown, and sign and labels. And in this training, we will be using the IREX inspection checklist to guide our discussion of the key elements to review across each of these areas. The first thing is the wiring management. So in this section, we will cover wiring. We will cover the inspection requirements and the related codes for each inspection step in this summary table. And this related codes are going to be listed in the related code column in those tables. The inspectors, first of all, the inspectors should verify that the bonding fittings are used for ferrous metals, conduits, enclosing, grounding, electrode conductors, and concentric, eccentric knockouts with metal conduits for circuits over 250 volts to ground. If ambient temperature exceeds 30 degrees Celsius, the conductor ampecities should be corrected for higher temperatures. So PV source and output circuits must be separated from non-PV system circuit conductors and inverter output circuit conductors. DC positive and negative conductors should not be identified with white or gray, except for solidly grounded PV system conductors. Single conductor cables must be secured within 12 inches of each box, cabinet, conduit body, or other termination. Continuing with the wiring management, PV system conductors shall be grouped and identified, and single conductor cables must be secured by staples, cable ties, straps, hangers, or similar fittings that intervals at intervals that do not exceed 4.5 feet. Exposed single conductor wiring must be at 90 degrees Celsius, wet rated, sunlight resistant type USE2, or listed as PV wire. DC conductors inside a building must be in metal raceway or metal clad cable. And properly sized equipment grounding conductor must be routed with circuit conductors. The terminals containing more than one conductor must be listed for multiple conductors. DC wiring in buildings must be listed in metallic conduit or raceways, and the conduit must be between sub-arrays and the DC combiner boxes. Expansion fittings must be installed where necessary to compensate for thermal expansion, deflection, and contraction. Connectors and terminals used for fine strand conductors must be listed for use with such conductors. Crimps on terminals must be listed and installed using listed tools specified for use of crimping those specific crimps. Pressure terminals must be listed for environment and tightened to manufacturer's recommended torque specification. And the conductors must be listed for voltage of the system and have appropriate temperature and ampere ratings. So this is basically covering the wiring management. Next thing to check is the module racking and the inverter equipment. The first thing is the PV module. So inspectors should verify, first of all, inspectors should verify that the module manufacturer make, model, number of modules matches they match the approved plan. And modules must be properly marked and labeled, and module connectors must be tight and secure. If the inspector should verify that the modules are grounded and bounded in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. If the racking system is used to bond the modules, the module and or rack assembly must be listed to bonding attribute of UL 2703. And the PV circuit locations should be clearly marked. And after PV, we continue with the inspection of the racking. And the inspector should verify that the roof penetrations are flashed to prevent moisture from entering the roof. And racking and PV system support structures installed and torqued per manufacturer's instructions and approved plan. And you can see a couple of examples of connectors and racking applications in this figure, and you can find more information about these in the International Residential Code, Chapter 9, Section R903. So after racking, the next thing to check is the inverter. First, the inspector should verify that the inverter is properly secured and the manufacturer's required clearances, and check that AC and DC terminations are properly torqued. Second, the inspector should verify that the inverter provides DC ground fault protection and DC arc fault protection where PV systems operate over 80 volts. And last, the labels should be per signage and requirement and table in signage requirement tables as installed. After the inverter inspection, the next thing to inspect is the point of connection, which includes the rapid shutdown device, grounding and labeling of that device. For the point of interconnection, the point of interconnection should be either on the supply side of the service, disconnecting means, or at the dedicated breaker, or disconnect on the load side of the service, disconnecting means. The total rating of the overcurrent protection device, OCPD, supplying a panel board plus 125% of the inverter output current should not exceed the 120% of the rating of the panel board bus bars. So this is actually important to check these numbers, and the labels can be used as reference, and an easy calculation can be done if this is within the limits of the overcurrent protection. And overcurrent protection for supply side connected power source conductors must be provided within 3 meters 10 inches of 10 feet of the point of interconnection to the service. And here is an example of a line side tap failure that also shows the significance of these inspections. If they are not properly inspected, this kind of results can happen, and this is a picture of a totally failed, burned line side tap failure from city of Sheldon. Next thing to inspect is the rapid shutdown. For rapid shutdown, the inspector should check the rapid shutdown initiation device installed and located per approved plan, and the dwellings must be outside the readily accessible location. Installed rapid shutdown equipment must be listed for application within limits of the National Electrical Code 690.12b, and labels should be per signage requirements table installed. And you can see the labels here in this picture. They should be visible and kind of displayed on the rapid shutdown device. Next thing is the grounding, overcurrent protection and disconnects. The inspector should check that the connection from PV system to the grounding electrode system is made per approved plan, and OPDCs are listed for use in PV systems, and ratings must match the approved plan. Disconnects used in PV systems must be rated for maximum short circuit current and voltage. Isolating devices or disconnects must be installed for the PV equipment, either integrated into the equipment or within the 10 feet of the equipment. Connectors that are readily accessible and operating at over 30 volts DC or 15 volts AC require a tool for opening, and PV source and output circuits in readily accessible locations and operate over 30 volts must be guarded or in a raceway. And in this picture, the upper photo shows a DC disconnect, which are next to an inverter, but the AC disconnects are outside, which is not okay. And the lower photo here shows an AC and DC connects are on the side of the inverter, which should be the proper way of installing the disconnects. Okay, that brings us to the signs and labels. So there are many signs and labels that needs to be visible and easily accessible and readable from outside. And these signs and labels should have suitable font sizes, words, colors, and location. The label should be of sufficient durability to withstand the environment involved, such as adhesive. If adhesives are using, they should be water resistant. So these are the important things, and the guidelines can be found in National Electrical Code 2023, Article 690, for proper use of labels in the system. So this is taking us to our first group exercise, which is going to give us some time to recover the heavy information we covered in inspection processes. So we will have a couple of questions and some kind of figures and pictures to share.
Yeah, I think we can launch the poll. If Kathy wouldn't mind launching that. So you can work your way through the set of questions in the poll, and then we're actually going to, for this set, we're going to talk about them all at the end. And so the poll is open. First question being, which locations do you see the most serious code violations? And then the next one being, what should the minimum working clearance be for anything that requires service? Oh,
yeah, I think
sorry,
we will in this group exercise we will go question by question.
But the poll questions, yeah. So let's just have folks answer the questions first. So the second question is, what should the minimum working clearance be? And then the third question is, what should the max current rating of the inverter connected to the overcurrent protection device be? So we're going to let folks answer the questions, and then we'll go through each of them. So we'll give it a minute. All right, we'll give it a minute more for folks to answer and get in there. All right, I think that's a good enough start. So I think we can end the poll at this point and share those results. So yeah, as you can see, a bit of a trick question, because in general, actually all we see issues at all of the areas that we articulated here. Some of the examples you can see on this slide. For some of the common things you might see as issues, could be improper wiring, et cetera. That's what you're seeing at this slide. So I think we can go to the next one. Here, everyone was pretty much aligned that you need 3-foot working clearances on all areas that need service. And so everyone was pretty much the same, pretty much aligned on that one. Moving to the next one. And I think, yeah, we can show the answers here. So you can kind of see a diagram of what's required when you're doing the OCPD. Just 125% of the inverter output. So you can think through, a lot of folks got that one right in the poll question. And then for 3B, the maximum allowable current is 120% of the bus bar. So those are more of the common things you might see as issues, and you would typically see where they might have approved something on the plan, but you're seeing actually something installed larger out in the field or smaller out in the field than what's on the plan. And so that'd be something, of course, you'd reject. This is something that should be caught at plan review, and you're just verifying out in the field what's installed on the plan matches what's out there. So I think we can move on from here. All right, and for this one, we'd love for folks to put into the chat what issues they see with these, or you can come off mute and chime in on any code violations you might see on this page. And we'll give it a minute. And you can use the chat or the Q&A box to chime in on what issues you might be seeing here. Yep, Dennis brought up improper flashing. Absolutely. It's almost as if this installation is incomplete, which that's item number C there. Certainly you see that. Anyone else see any issues with the installations here? Certainly improper wire management, definitely in number B. Yep, Dennis pointed that out, that you're not, those wires aren't protected, they aren't clean and running through and flush with the panels underneath. They can be catch hazards, all sorts of problems with those wires. Yep. And then also incorrect installation of products. And certainly in the image A there, you can only install that. All right, vertically, you can install that horizontally. So a bunch of issues relative to that one as well. And yeah, so I think, yeah, so just you can click through those. Awesome. All right, I think at this point, Sertaç, we can move on.
Sure, definitely. Okay, so this is taking us a second chapter of this training session, the field inspection session. In this part of the training, in this chapter, we will look at field inspection examples from different PV systems. And so the first system that we're going to look at is going to be a microinverter system. So microinverter PV systems convert DC to AC right after the module via an inverter located at the rooftop. When the inspector starts the inspection, the first things to inspect are rooftop array and the inverter. PV modules must be listed to the UL 1703 and the microinverters must be listed to UL 1741. Array conductors must not touch the roof surface, and they are properly secured and supported. Conductors that touch the roof are subject to damage and cause system failures and arcing fires. Conductors must be protected from prolonged exposure and must have the proper band radius and not strained. The microinverters must be attached to the racking system with torque values specified by the manufacturer. The roof attachments must be securely mounted and the structural members with proper weather sealings. So after that, after completing the rooftop array, the inspection must continue with the conduit and the junction box. The conductor type and the connections in a rooftop junction box and the conduit must be listed for wet locations. Location of the PV system disconnects must match the plan. There's no need for labeling AC conduits. There's only labeling required for the DC conduits, not the ACs. Some utility companies require an external AC disconnect for visible activation. In that case, the rapid shutdown label must be installed per plan. A system equipped with rapid shutdown means that the controlled conductors shall be limited to not more than 30 volts and 240 volts amperes within 10 seconds of rapid shutdown initiation. So the last major item we will consider relative to microinverter system is the main service board and meter. The inspector must verify that the bus size of the point of utility interconnection, the main circuit breaker and the inverter circuit breakers must match the plan. The sum of ampere ratings of device supplying power to a bus bar or conductor shall not exceed 120% of the rating of the bus bar or conductor, similar to what we have described in the previous section. The inspector must also verify additional equipment grounding conductor follows that cable path, racking system and module combination for bonding, grounding, and fire resistance rating, wire management, and proper labeling. The second system is a string system. String systems are slightly different than the inverter systems because in a string inverter PV system, the PV modules generate DC and the conduit carries DC to the inverter. The string inverters are mostly located at the ground level in a residential application. The main things to check at a rooftop array are module, attachments, and junction box, and also wire management. All roof attachments, including junction boxes, must be properly weather sealed. DC-DC converters must be properly attached to the mounting structure, and the modules must be attached to the racking system with torque values specified by the manufacturer. The second thing is the conduits, as we discussed, the conduits carry a DC, and the conduits must be properly labeled in every 10 feet and adequately supported in every 6 feet intervals. This is different than the AC conduits. They need labeling. So the conduit boxes that are a part of DC circuit must be correctly labeled for identification, and inverters must be installed at proper orientation, mounting, and labeling. In some cases, utility requires an external accessible DC disconnect. In that case, the inspector must verify that the label shows AC operating voltage and maximum AC current. The sub-panel of the string inverter system is connected to the AC disconnect, and once the AC disconnect is operated, each DC-DC converter is limited to 1 volt. So National Electrical Code requires if there's an AC in an AC disconnect system, a number of disconnects depending on the product in the system and utility requirements should be in line with the NEC requirements. And the inspector should verify the size of the bus bar versus the output of the inverter and check that there's a continuity within the grounding system so that there is no difference in potential. Last thing to check is the main meter. Bidirectional main meters must be located near the string inverter and must be sealed for weather conditions. And this can be seen in these pictures. So, but what if the project has a battery storage? So we have the same issue here. Battery storage systems require additional inspection processes. So if the system has a battery storage, the electrical structure of PV system with a lithium-ion energy storage system is far more complex than a standalone PV system, which needs additional considerations and inspection processes. Additional inspections required for individual battery capacity rating, aggregate capacity ratings by installation location, and heat detection. The aggregate capacity rating for the energy storage system installed within the utility closets, basements, and storage or utility spaces should be 40 kilowatt hour. And in an attached or detached garages or detached accessory structures, exterior walls and outdoors on the ground should be 80 kilowatts per hour. 80 kilowatts hour. The inspector must check access pathways in and out of dwellings and verify that the structure attachments follow the seismic design requirements of their category. For example, much of California is in seismic design category D or greater, which requires most robust structural design consideration. So these are the main things to check in a lithium-ion energy storage system. Additionally, flexible battery cables must leave the battery enclosure. Flexible fine strand cables must be used in terminals, lugs, devices, and connectors that are listed and marked for such use. Area must be well ventilated, and the batteries are not installed in living areas. Live parts of battery systems must be guarded to prevent accidental contact by person or objects. Working space and illumination must be provided around the battery installation. Proper diagrams, place cards must be provided at the building, electric service equipment, and other power source locations. So these are actually basic things to check in the energy storage. As we explained earlier, a more detailed training may be needed because of the complexity of battery storage systems and the different types of battery storage equipment. So this is taking us to our second group exercise, which will have a couple of more questions.
Yep. Kathy, would you run our last poll? We've made it to the last one. Awesome. So yeah, first question is asking about labeling. What can you find on a label? We threw a couple of options and suggestions on there for you. And then second question is about length and interval of DC conduit. And then the third question about AC conduit needing labeling. And then fourth, what's the aggregate capacity for batteries that would be installed or potentially installed in the basement? And realizing for question one, maybe we didn't give you the option to do all of the above, unfortunately. So that question, I guess, why don't you just put the answer up, Sertaç, because our poll question is inaccurate, unfortunately. So there's a lot of items you can get from a label, and we reflected that, and sort of all of the answers that you have can be found on a label. So we just highlighted a couple of things here in red that you could see. So that question, Sertaç, let's just remember when we do that poll question in the future that we fix it. So sorry about that, everyone, that was an oversight on our side. So we can move them to the second question, Sertaç, just to have that on the screen. But let's let them get a minute to answer the questions in poll. So we'll give it another minute for those.
Sorry.
So that you can answer those questions. Again, what length and interval for DC conduit in terms of being labeled and supported, and do you have to label AC conduit? Those are the two questions that we'll cover on this one. And then the third question is asked about batteries. And then, sorry, the fifth one I missed. It's about bus bar rating. We'll get to that one furthest on. But we're getting some answers in, so we'll give it another minute for folks to answer some of the later questions. All right, I think we can click through to the answer for 2A, Sertaç. We can talk a little bit about that one. So it's a label in every 10 feet and support in every 6 feet. And then you only need to label AC conduit. And looking at our poll questions, most folks got that one for the labeling, and certainly most folks also for the DC conduit. Now I think we can move on to question 3. All right, so this is aggregate capacity rating for lithium-ion batteries. So you can have 20 kWh for an individual battery, but we're talking aggregate capacity. So how many batteries could one install in the basement? And so in this case, now there can be modifications to this, but per the model code, it's 40 kWh. So you could have 2 batteries if they were both rated at 20 kWh in the battery, or some combination of that, depending on also what your local amendments are for that. All right, and I think we can move to the final one. At this point, I think we can close the poll too, so folks can see it. All right, and same question here. If you got a 200 amp bus bar, what can your maximum contribution from the PV system be? And that's at 120% of your bus bar rating, which means 40 amps.
Mhm.
All right, so at this point, I can pass back to you, Sir Josh.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So we will continue with some field inspection best practices. Okay, so to start with, what are the major problem areas and related code considerations? So one common area for code violation is the overall installation quality. And the inspector should verify if the work is done in a neat and workmanlike manner. Roof penetrations must be flashed or sealed. The array exposed cables must be properly secured, supported, and routed to prevent physical damage. The conduits must be correctly installed, and there must be sufficient workspace and access for the operation and maintenance of the PV equipment. So continuing with the major consideration, the second thing is to check, does the installation match the plan? Another major problem area is correspondence to the plan, and the inspector should verify whether the PV module, model number, quantity, and the locations, array mounting system, and structural connections, type and size of the overcurrent protection device, disconnects and their locations, grounding, bounding of rack and modules, connection of PV system to the grounding electrode system, and also the rapid shutdown system match the plan or not. And another major problem area is the fire protection and emergency response. And in this case, the inspector should verify that there are firefighter access setbacks and the roof-mounted PV systems have the required fire classification. And many inspectors also verify whether the home has operating smoke alarms through the PV is unlikely to cause a fire. Operating smoke alarms are proven to save lives in all situations. Then comes the labeling. And in the labeling, the inspector should verify that all the conductor cables, conduit types, and sizes are marked properly, and all the labels are placed according to the plan, and it's their proper location. Of course, we discussed that earlier in the chapter. They need to be weatherproof. If they are using adhesives, the labels should be visible, having proper fonts and sizes. These are actually easy to detect type of violations. And I think this is covering everything that we want to cover today. And as a key takeaway from today's presentation, as a summary, the key takeaways are the field inspection process is the key to the development of healthy and safe PV industry. And inspections verify that the installation is compliant with the building and electrical codes and fire safety requirements. And many inspection checklists exist that can help the inspectors to perform their code enforcement obligations. Major common code violations are in the array, inverter, grid connection, and junction boxes. Wire management is one of the most important part of the inspection. Conductors that touch the ground, the roof, are subject to damage, which can cause system failures and arcing fires. Electrical grounding is another important consideration for electrical inspection, and fire departments should have a safe path that they can access to the roof. Pairing with the battery storage is likely to grow in the future, and this needs more inspection in the future, and this is partially covered in this training, but needs further attention for upcoming solar PV installations. So thank you for your attention and interest, and this is bringing us to the Q&A session for this training.
Yeah, so not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A, but folks can come off mute or put their questions in now or anything like that if they have any at this point. And thank you. I saw James, you said thank you in the chat. I wanted to thank everyone that's here. It's a long time and a lot of training, so I want to thank everyone for participating for sure. And we are available after this too, so if you have questions after we close up today, you can always reach out to us as well. And I think Kathy, you had said this was going to be recorded, if I remember right. So
yes, we recorded this session, and we'll share that recording out with folks, and we'll also make your slide decks available. Yeah, so thank you. This was terrific. You know, coming into this, I was like, wow, 2.5 hours on a webinar, but you know, okay, lots of this is new to me. The fun fact for everyone is the inspection of my updated solar array happens next week, and now I feel much more qualified to follow the inspector around and watch what they're doing and know a little bit about what's actually going on there. So yeah, this was terrific. Thanks everybody for being here. You've got questions. If you've got questions about SolSmart, you can reach out to Zach. You can reach out to us at Dane County. We're happy to help you connect with Zach and have that conversation. So terrific. And kudos to NREL. It is not trivial to do a presentation this long and end on time. Jeff told me though, he said, we will not go over the schedule. We will make this happen in the time. And so I am like very impressed at your ability to pace Sertak and Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, definitely a lot of kudos to Sertak. He was a key member in making sure we stayed on time today. So
Yes.
Really happy that
Yes.
we did that because everyone's time is precious. So thank you so much.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks everyone. We will be in touch. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank
See
you.
ya.